Hello my friends. What better way to spend my time in the real-life dystopian world dictatorship than to play a video game set in a dystopian scenario of the future? We will embark on a journey in the cyberpunk genre, a genre which I love and hate at the same time. Love because it criticizes the system, even if it does it mostly from the lens of corporate control of the world, and completely forgets that too much government power can also lead to a dystopian world. Through cyberpunk, you have endless possibilities of characters and stories through which you can express the social and political situation of the world. Depending on how the writers explore these possibilities, you can end up with a very in-depth world with interesting morality situations at a macro level, which is how the world itself is being ran, and micro level, which is how the people act to each other at a local level. In a video game, these concepts should be reflected in every aspect through the story, interactions, but also through the visuals and little details of the environments. A superficial understanding of cyberpunk might lead to an out-of-place situation that the true fans of the genre will not enjoy. Many feel that Cyberpunk 2077's world is just smoke and mirrors, or just a lo-fi GTA but with a bit of cyberpunk topping on it. The world in that game is not dark or complex enough in both visuals and story. The world feels empty sometimes, with shops that don't even have anyone behind the counter. You can still have fun in it, it's just that the expectations were higher, but I'm not here to talk about that overly promoted game. Instead, I will take a look at an indie project called The Ascent. The Ascent manages to do a nice blend of cyberpunk dynamics, and through the story arc as you progress you start from just doing some low-level errands for a local gangster, but by the end you learn about the macro, and know everything about how the world is being ran with all its secret corpo conspiracies. The Ascent aims high, but can it reach that destination? Well, in some aspects yes, in others not so much, but what The Ascent manages to do is draw a meaningful path through the video game landscape and not getting added to the many disappointments from entertainment recently. People are sick of broken games being released, or games that feel soulless, or games that make you feel that some woke propaganda is being fed to you through the story. This is not the case with The Ascent, even though it has some broken parts, or less inspired choices for the gameplay, or not such a captivating story, but let me take you through the rabbit hole and dive into the meat of this game to see what it's all about, from my perspective. When you start the game, you get greeted by this menu. A menu that screams at you that some heart was put in it. Someone really did their homework on how to make a good main menu. You have a nice classic cyberpunk landscape that is reminiscent of the architecture from Blade Runner. This landscape is somewhat dynamic with two details that bring it to life. You can see the different ships moving about randomly, and on the lower right side of your screen there are these analog lights that blink on and off. I don't know why, but just seeing that vintage style light blinking with its reflection on the ground makes me feel something. My character is right there, looking at the grim world, waiting to explore it. There is a bit of smoke in the atmosphere, impairing long-range vision, showing the pollution aspect. The colors are different nuances of red and black, in a way reminding me of similar aesthetics used in the intro of a post-apocalyptic cyberpunk movie by the name of Hardware from 1990. Over these visuals we can hear a beautiful analog synthesizer track that has sounds that take me to the classic Blade Runner soundtrack composed by Vangelis, by his real name Evangelos Odysseas Papatanasiou, but also a choir that seems inspired from making of Cybertrack from Ghost in the Shell, composed by Kenji Kawai. The final result of this main menu is to fully immerse myself in this world without even knowing anything about it yet. A very good start. Now let it be known before you continue to watch this video that what I'm about to say may not be correct in terms of lore or story. This video is simply a review of the game from my experience and with my what could be superficial understanding of the story. The purpose of this video for me is to mostly explore the atmosphere of the game, the level design, the gameplay and the story, but not in its whole complexity. I may even replace terms of jobs or titles that the characters have in the game, because honestly I can't remember it all, but I still want to talk about the characters and what they do, if that makes sense. My main motivation to make this video is to get other people to appreciate the well done environments, and show how a bit of quality lore can raise the value of a game significantly. I want to inspire other game developers to do the same, or better, why not? I will also occasionally draw parallels and comparisons to things that happen in the real world, because cyberpunk is a genre that inspires from futuristic trends, but also pokes and critiques real-world problems, but through an artistic lens and set in a futuristic dystopia. The video will be full of spoilers because my reason is not just to make a review, but to show a fleshed out understanding and interpretation of what I've seen in this game. Of course, I will also talk about the game mechanics and whatnot, so let's get on with it. You start the game in the Deepstink, the lowest level possible, as an errand boy for Poon, which is like a local gangster that somehow is in charge of Cluster 13. He is a stack boss. He is the landlord of the city, characterized by being angry and yelling at you all the time. This type of character helps to paint a gloomy picture of this level of society, where the locals, indents as they are called, are all at the bottom of the society pyramid. The game calls this pyramid the Arcology. An arcology in the real world is the fusion of architecture with ecology, a comprehensive urban perspective. In nature, as organisms evolve, they increase in complexity and become a more compact system. A city should similarly evolve, functioning as a living system. It all sounds quite idealistic in the vision of Paolo Soleri, the man who invented the concept and term back in 1969. He envisioned an arcology to provide all the needs that humans have: housing, different means of production including agriculture, commercial areas, everything. In the Ascent, the Arcology gets a coating of potential problems. Who owns the Arcology? A corporation, mainly the Ascent. Does it care about all aspects of humans' living conditions there? No, it only cares about the people at the top to enjoy their green grass and sunlight, as the rest of the people are stuck living how they can in the trash or in different levels of illusion of freedom. So let's understand this world. The Arcology is split in 4 levels, the first one being the Deepstink itself, where the machines that run the city are located, including the CPUs and databases of different functions like power management, waste management, recycling, hence the Deepstink term for this level, or even the database with the sensitive data of a large corporation. So the game, regardless of your progress or society ranks, keeps sending you back here, whether you are trying to do something for the gangster of Cluster 13, or late game database hacking to find the Ascent's deepest secrets in the D-Nexus or Menshan. You'll find yourself shooting mainly ferals as you travel through the dark and brown mechanized Deepstink. Nothing here points out to humanity. All you see is machines, cables, robots and the packs of ferals that you'll have to fight. Even in such a hopeless environment, the developers have managed to create detail and beauty, especially with some of the in-depth big structures that you may see. The second level, the Warrens, is where the lowest members of society live. The indents, which are people indebted to work for corporations all their life, in order to be allowed to reside in the hab stacks, short for habitation stacks. The hab stacks in the Warrens are stacked very close together. They are small like the structures from the slums of Johannesburg, but also stacked. Stacks of low quality habitation, for the plebs is what they are. The atmosphere here is humid, and sometimes the indents can feel the smell of the wastes coming from the maintenance level. The indents live here most of their life, stuck in the same job and not even being allowed to travel to the upper levels. The crime rate is high and the police don't care too much if a random indent gets stabbed in an alley. Despite all this, the habbers do have ways to entertain themselves, as towns like Cluster 13 or Steamtown do have eateries, bars and other services for people to spend their small free time in. It reminds me of how people living their depressed life in my homeland, after a hard day of manual labor work, they use the free time that they have to go and blow away the few money that they have at the local slot machines, at a not so appealing looking bar. Content with their harsh lives, beaten down into servitude, they don't rebel against the system but instead comply and drink their depression away or fall more into it. Inside this level, tucked away on its outskirts, lies Noghead's base in the Black Lake Towers area. The hideout has its own vibe that is set with loud levels of reggae music. These people seem to enjoy it here and use this level to keep a low profile and chill with Noghead. In fact, they live in a neighborhood that was kind of left away to rot as an unfinished Ascent residential project. One of Noghead's people openly tells you how he prefers the freedom of this place as opposed to being under pressure, living on the upper levels. In a way, he outlines the risks of the high life and shows that it is possible to live more under stress as a member of the high society than as an outcast in Noghead's hideout. This is a deep statement, the kind that I like to see in video games. Sometimes it's better to have close to nothing, but have a sense of freedom and continuity, than be someone who has reached the peaks of Wall Street, but is committing suicide by jumping from a skyscraper. Throughout the Warrens, every place has a meaning and every corner its story, that you will have to read in the lore section of the menu. In particular, I have liked the background for Cluster 13, Steamtown, Rooftops, and Black Lake Towers. Without reading any of it, the game sure can be interpreted as just an errand simulator twin-stick shooter. But like I said, it's something special when you can read every information about these streets, characters, and enemies that exist in this world that makes sense. This aspect of every corner having its story is not just a gimmick, because every area does feel different, has a different color palette and specific vibe about it, with its specific enemies that connect with the story of the area. The third level, Highstreet, this is where the bigger players conduct their activities, from big club owners to large commercial areas to the Golden Satori, which is this large casino that is really impressive to look at and go to. Again, just being on this elevator and having this angle to look at the landscape is impressive. In other twin-stick shooters, you just don't have this large 3D scope. It takes a lot for a game to keep me interested in doing the same repetitive tasks these days, so having a deep lore and an impressive world to look at really does the trick. Of course, in this level, with so many opportunities and businesses, there are also forces similar to mafias that control different things and have their own wars, so the danger scale increases. The technology used is much more enhanced to what we've seen in the Warrens, and we meet the Onyx Void with their badass leader, 484 Hunk. This mafia-type group have a very unusual headquarters with cute cats on the walls. What once was a hydrocat facility now is the home for this ruthless group that does dirty work for whoever pays the most, including the Ascent themselves. The locals used to joke about them and their headquarters, but soon stopped due to sudden accidents happening to those who spread such jokes, with the expression "cat got your tongue" getting a different meaning, as they really did remove the vocal organs of the people they didn't like as well. People in Highstreet have much more self-esteem. In fact, they are very proud and don't even refer to themselves as indents, so as not to get confused with the low-hab scum below in the Warrens. Many hide behind thick layers of snobbery and arrogance, but in reality, they are as much beholden to their contracts as their lower-end level brethren. They think they are free, they have certain privileges that people in the Warrens don't, they live in a more colorful world with more neons, they have bigger businesses and spend their money in a giant casino with a more high-class service, but they are still slaves. At the end of the day, is it worth it to step on your brother, to climb the ladder of success, to still be a slave in the end? It is only the illusions that change, but they are still illusions. Highstreet is again a very diverse place. Similar to the Warrens, it has its own unique places to visit, with unique stories such as the Node, a mysterious commercially successful place where small shops exist together with large shops, licensed vendors as well as unlicensed. It's a strange contrast, so much business is being done that the local fusion plant which provides the electricity would have imploded if not for CorpSec setting limits for power consumption. There are different type of corporation zones, Corp Zone home to the big corporation offices with the big logos, and ResDev where there are no logos because all kinds of secretive work is being done here, including by the Ascent. There are so many NDAs here that even saying you work in ResDev could get you flatlined. There is the Cosmodrome, an area which handles all the trade and influx of immigrants. This is where large ships go through with immense traffic being generated daily. These passengers are then checked in Thames Gate, which is also interesting to look at when you have fights through the transfer area. Scrapland, another interesting area where machines go to heal or die. It's obviously full of scrap, but also low-habbers. Yes, they exist even in the Highstreet, living in the scrap piles, some as mechanics or engineers, and some just surviving. Again, they somehow prefer the freedom of living in scrap and sadly not even having running water than to live with the corporations. The fourth level is the Pinnacle. This is where the Illuminati live. They even have the pyramids and as above so below symbolism to add something to the occult symbolism list. The people living in the Pinnacle are the highest social class. They get to see the sky and are free. The Ascent group board members all have large residences here. Those who reside in the Pinnacle don't have to worry about violence. It is entirely peaceful here. In fact, it is so peaceful here that this local doesn't react when I violently harass his personal space, proof that high conditions of living can turn you into a wimp, letting invaders do as they please. The Grateful Abbot broadcasts news from here. The Grateful Abbot is a story of starting from the bottom and making it big, so even the low-habs from the Warrens love him, not only for his story, but for his optimism and apparently nice behavior off camera. He is one of the few at the top who traveled into the Warrens to understand the people's problems better and report on it. People look at him on screens or public holograms to get the latest Arcology news, and sometimes the news is flawed, and he ends up saying cover-up stories made by the ones in high places to hide the real truth, as with the case of the events at the end of the game. The Grateful Abbot is a bit naive, as can be seen through the interactions with him when he loses his fob and doesn't have access to the Pinnacle, but also how he can just recite horrible events with a positive tone, or just take the fake news as he was given by higher powers and just present it to the audience with the same positive tone. The Ascent doesn't really care about its own citizens. We see this when Abbot loses his fob, then there isn't any other alternative for access to the Pinnacle. The fob is like an ID for the elites, and even Grateful Abbot, who is a famous news anchor working for the Ascent, if he doesn't have the fob, a giant mech won't let him pass and even threaten to disintegrate him on spot if he doesn't present the fob or move away. He's so hopeless, and you as the player want to help him and get his fob back. Poor guy, even if he does present fake news sometimes, he's just a nice, naive, clumsy guy. Gotta love him. Perhaps that's why the Ascent uses him as an anchor, because such a person is easy to control and direct without facing opposition.
If I hadn't lost my fob, I'd be relaxing in my rinser already.
Please disperse or face lethal repercussions.
The Ascent has their headquarters here at the Pinnacle and also their AGI, which are self-aware, super-intelligent, entirely artificial beings that are used in managing all the data and keeping the systems running. That sounds like a great idea. I bet our real-world system can't wait to have something like this, despite everyone's warnings. Apparently, it consumes unfathomable amounts of energy, so they are very rare. Humans, for example, don't have one because they are too poor in this game's universe. But you are a human, and so your story begins in this complex universe. It's not such a large story, mainly your time is occupied with running around shooting stuff, often returning to areas you've been before. So here's how it goes according to my understanding. You start in the Deepstink. Poon the gangster actually has a point. The Ascent, the mega corporation, has suddenly crashed, so what this means is that any other corporation is left to take control of the different areas and systems. One could even take control of the Arcology if they have the resources and the firepower to get in the Ascent headquarters and appropriate the main AGI. That's how it works. You hack into the core of a system and then it's yours. And everyone accepts that for some reason, so if Poon the gangster takes over the power facility in the Deepstink, for example, then he becomes a player in the Arcology. Of course, you have to do all the shooting and hacking while Poon sits around on his ass giving you orders. So in a sense, this will be the chance for Cluster 13 to become independent, its own micro-universe, cut out from any centralized decisions. Poon even negotiates some kind of alliance with the other low-hab leaders and wants to free scientists and hostages taken by Onyx Void. Does he do it because he really wants people to be free? Not really. He needs the scientists to be free so they can run the systems for the future independent Cluster 13 and low-hab zones, who will have as their leader none other than Poon. The man who yells at people to do stuff, who never shows any love or care for the people that work for him. He's a gangster that wants to be at the top on his own turf, and that's about it. So going back in the Deepstink, you go on this mission of independence, and after defeating the spider boss, you meet this new, what appears to be a strong character, called Kira. I don't know if it's a she or he or an it, but because of the name, I will just say she. She stops the whole operation. She appropriates the fission plant for herself and her shadowy corporation Y-Corp. And she even appropriates you, but with a twist. Working for her and fulfilling the plan that she has might actually get you free. So from a low-level indent working for a gangster, you might have a chance to be free. Of course that means you're going to have a tough journey, fighting tougher enemies and deconspiring things that could put you in danger from which there is no return. Refuse the offer and you'll be flatlined, killed. So there is no choice. Kira's character is in no way a salvation. She puts you on an almost impossible mission and doesn't really care about your life at all. Occasionally she may say that you have some fighting skills for a human, but that's it. Even when she does that, she takes the chance to say how dumb your race is and how it's strange that you are not like the rest of your species. So, can I trust someone like that to be my friend? Not really. After the takeover, she installs her temporary headquarters in Cluster 13. From here you must make your way up in Highstreet, then back in the Deepstink, then to the Pinnacle, and back down in the Deepstink for the final showdown. This game should just be called the Deepstink. Your missions involve appropriating systems, tracing information, more appropriating, and more tracing. Kira and her corporation do have their own AGI, so they are big players. But even so, they still need the help of Noghead, the Rasta hacker, in most operations, even until the end. And that's the reason why they keep him alive and let him do his thing. There is no empathy with this group, just business. If they need you, they keep you. If not, they kill you, for the information that you possess about them and their operations. If you're going to have a best friend in this game, then that is without any doubt Noghead. He's there for you from the beginning, when you do stuff for Poon, to Kira's crusade, and even at the end. He has your back at all times with his wacky character and hacker skills. On the deconspiring journey, you become stronger, not only as a killing machine, but also in your knowledge about how the world works. You understand all the major players, and you see things that no lowhabber ever will. And you end up at the Ascent's headquarters, where you find out why the Ascent collapsed and the reason for all this chaos. Apparently it has to do with another human. CTO Dakin, who made it to the top but never was promoted to being an actual board member amongst the Aforans. So in her jealousy, she strikes a conspiracy to take over the Ascent herself, and she almost did it, if not for the Ascent's AGI shutting itself down, as to avoid being appropriated. So that is where you come in. Upon finding out what happened, you know who the new enemy is, and you have to go after Dakin and her allies. You also have to stop their secret project of teleportation technology, which the Ascent started in the past but failed to finish due to it having loads of errors and fluctuations during the testing. Being the pioneer of teleportation technology means that you could travel anywhere in the universe super fast. It means you would control that service, a very in-demand service. It would mean you would be the king of the universe basically, and Dakin is in power-hungry mode. She wants that, despite all the hazardous risks of starting such a portal. Interestingly enough, looking through the data pads of the world, you'll find out that there are other scientists who completely debunk and criticize the teleportation idea, saying that it is a technology that just rearranges you at a molecular level. In other words, a copy while your original self dies, similarly to what happens in the transhumanism idea with people wanting to upload themselves in machines. It is also just a copy that is being uploaded while your real self dies. As you know by following my channel, there is a pattern with these portals. They never work, and there is always a beast getting out of them from the other dimension. As an example, I would give Stranger Things, where the government is doing some secret experiments under Project MKUltra to open a similar portal into the Upside Down world. That movie also presents as above so below symbolism, where the above is the normal world, but slowly gets corrupted by the below, which is a dark world with a giant black goo monster as the main boss. If you want a video game example, there is an older Wolfenstein game where the Nazis want to open the portal so they can harness black sun energy to add innovations to their Nazi war machine.
Beautiful, isn't it? Such raw, unbridled power.
Both experiments go bad. Are these devs and writers warning us of what could happen if we mess with such portals, or do they know something that we don't from what has already happened and present us that information through their fictional works? Could CERN be a place where we might accidentally open a dimension to a very wrong place? I mean, I'm not sure what information the 11 independent developers of Neon Giant possess. I'm not sure if they themselves went to the subnet of secret projects and exposed them for us few players of this game, but it's really close to the real thing and to what the conspiracy truth seeker community is talking about. Except we are talking more about government secret projects rather than corporation projects. The truth is perhaps somewhere in the middle. But as we know, United States government funded research in China at the Wuhan labs, for example. The guy in charge of America's response to COVID turns out to be the guy who funded the creation of COVID. We're speaking of Tony Fauci and the gain-of-function experiments at the Wuhan laboratory that the United States government with his approval paid for. Gain-of-function is a term that could describe any type of virology research that results in the gain of a certain function, but the type that's controversial, including among scientists, is research that causes a pathogen to be more infectious, particularly to humans. There is no direct evidence to prove that the virus was caused by this operation, but it makes one wonder and could be a recent example of government projects that go very wrong. So again, what I would like to see cyberpunk story creators is to also show the potential of things going bad because of the government and not just mega corporations. You can have them both doing something crazy. In the Ascent, you stop the crazy project. But what now? Will the world be better under Y Corp? Like I said, under no context provided by the game, Kira and her Y Corp show that they are a great alternative. They are as ruthless as any of the other factions, and she presents no empathy, not even for you, who basically put in application her entire plan. So that's the story, as I understand it. For me, it's as good a story as any 80s science fiction action movie, and I like those. A little on the simple side, but executed correctly from the indie game studio.
I took the liberty to install a small backdoor into the Mensch OS. Kira knows, but she can't remove it without destroying the gate. It's the sole reason you and I are still alive. There's nothing like a bit of mutually assured destruction to bring a corp to heel. No need to thank me, bud. Join me in Terraline instead. Level 72 now.
It is definitely enriched by all the other lore elements that the game has for you to study. But what about the gameplay? Perhaps it's best to make the 80s comparison again. Those were simpler times. Rambo could shoot infinite bullets without changing a mag, and it wouldn't really take you away from enjoying the movie. Something similar happens here. The gameplay loop is not the best out there, but it's satisfying to experience it from beginning to the mid and late game. I found myself using even the same RPG weapon for the most part of the game because it's satisfying to shoot, and this game offers a mechanic for you to be able to upgrade your existing weapons as you progress through the game and find crafting components. The system is straightforward. You can use two guns, a primary and a secondary weapon. This game doesn't have a giant list of weapons, but the ones it has do feel good to shoot. You have shotguns, machine guns, sidearms, precision weapons, and my favorite section, the excessive weapons. I chose the RPG as my main weapon and with a machine gun as a secondary for the most part of my playthrough. The animation and the sound of these guns is on point, and the weapons have some fantastic name choices like Astro Masher, the Fist, or Room Sweeper. The armor system is straightforward. You have head, torso and legs armor with different types of resistance capabilities. So for example, if you are fighting a big spider that shoots fire at you, you might want to use an armor that has more fire resistance. Study your enemy and proceed accordingly. There is a color system in this game for your weapons and armor to describe the quality level. This helped me to avoid spending a lot of time when trying to get rid of armor or weapons that I looted, because I could just sell what wasn't elite. The way the armor looks makes sense. The lower level armor is smaller, and the elite late game stuff makes you look like a tank, as opposed to Cyberpunk 2077's armor system, where the armor look strange. You also have the possibility to use tactical weapons or augmentations, from temporary robot helpers to spider kamikaze, to health regeneration, to a matrix ability that makes the incoming bullets go slower, to transforming for a limited time into a mech suit. While playing, you will find the combination that works best for you. I found that for late game, what worked for me was getting in that mech while also having health restoration possibilities. But you can also restore your health and energy at the local vending machines scattered all over the maps. You can even hack those vending machines if you feel like you don't want to pay for your drinks. You have a cyber deck that you can use to hack not only vending machines but doors or open bridges or chests with loot. These come in different quality levels as well, but you will only find them by exploring the world. For instance, I found one in Knockhead's base. I mean, it makes sense with a bunch of hackers living there, but other than that, I had a low-level cyber deck through my entire playtime. Not having the best cyber deck won't stop you from winning the game, but having poorly managed skill point choices will. However, I think I did pretty good with that, but if you do mess it up, the game offers the possibility to spend in-game currency to a grafter that will reset all your skill points. These skills are not so complex anyway, compared to something like Fallout 3 or Skyrim, but they are good enough to help you make your tactic of choice work. I found myself making a basic build with a good balance between all the skills and the tactical skill. I didn't really put anything there in the beginning because I was being such a casual that I didn't even realize I had that extra power. The game makes much more sense with the tacticals being used. Using the weapons, the right type of armor and the tacticals really make for some satisfying gameplay, causing high amounts of action on 360 degrees. So you've got the gear, but who will you use it against? The enemies in this game are very diverse, in the real sense of the word. There are swarm type enemies that you see for example in the ferals of the Deepstink or at the Black Lake Towers, which are weak on their own, but as a swarm you really have to be careful to keep them at bay on the 360 canvas. You have big slow monsters or robots but with high damage output when they do attack, so you'll have to use the cover mechanic, which is really good. You can just completely avoid damage while holding right click, or you can roll around like a prick the entire time, and this is where that evasion skill really matters. You have different medium caliber enemies that are about the same size as you and wield the same weapons as you, except for the katana sword warriors, which you can't have, or the shield-bearing bastard, but when you learn that you can use the RPG against the shield-bearing bastard, that problem is dealt with. There are stationary machines that shoot things at you, so you will have to juggle a lot, because when all these enemies come at you, sometimes it's hard to pick what move you should make, but with practice you will be able to understand the flow. I had to restart checkpoints in various situations, and when that happened I usually had to rethink my strategy, try a different gun, put the right type of armor, use a different tactical, but it's satisfying when you apply the new strategy and it works. Of course you also have the big bosses. The big bosses, from the giant spider to mech suits to this badass individual, to machines and even ships. These bosses are not Dark Souls levels of difficulty, but they are fair opponents, so I have had fun with them, especially the battle with 438 Hung, the leader of Onyx Void. In fact, he even had a fair point in his discourse when he said that you don't even know who you're working for.
Do you even know who your real employer is? Such ignorance.
We absolutely have no idea about Y Corp's true intentions. We just blindly work for them because we have no other choice. And you still live at the end of the game because Knockhead put a rootkit in Y Corp's system as a security measure and guarantee for both your and his life. Something like honor your deal or all your base are belong to Knockhead. You can orient yourself in the game quite easily. You kind of work like a submarine. You know the general direction of where you need to go and then press a key for the specific location to be shown, as well as the distance from your objective with this particle line that appears and slowly disappears. It's pretty cool, but you can also bring up the map if you want the bigger picture. However, if you don't know the locations by heart from reading about them in the codex, you don't really care about the map or need it or understand it. I for one found it useful because I read the lore and wanted to see the bigger picture. So the map design is questionable, but I like it. I also like the user interface. It's simple and straight to the point with a design of colors that fit with the game. The level design is pretty good, but it can be annoying to have to go fight in the same areas that you've already been to, especially in the case of the Deepstink. There are safe areas on each level of the Arcology. These are mostly the towns, but other than that, everyone seems to want your head on a plate. All the enemies that you fight are appropriately designed to fit with the lore of the space you're fighting in, and you can spend time in the codex to read about both the enemy that you faced and the place itself. I can't stop pointing this aspect out because I really appreciate it. Towards the end of the game, it does make you wonder why these low-level enemies still have the courage to tell you to go away in 5 seconds.
Yet more collateral damage and innocent deaths have been reported in your wake. We are scrubbing the records, but we are displeased. Very displeased.
The camera usage in these levels can help to enhance the experience, for example showing you how large an area is, or fighting through the tight corridor of Thumb's Gate. The way the camera works, coupled with the pioneer usage of the Y-axis 3D map layout in a twin-stick shooter, really makes this game beautiful to look at and play in. If you do get bored of walking around through the world to get to your mission or back from it, which you will, even if the game is beautiful, you can use the public transport system. Either 1000 Euclids taxi or the metro, which is actually some sort of maglev train. There are some issues with these systems though. You will always see exactly the same NPCs doing the same things each time on the train, even though you are in a completely different Arcology levels. It doesn't matter anymore, everyone is the same. So that kind of takes away from the immersion, and the taxis play either music, which is fine, or the Grateful Abbott's news, which is also fine, but often I find it repetitive because the audio file starts exactly at the start of the news story each time.
This is the feed with Grateful Abbott. The Rammet 3 arrived in orbit this cycle. This is the feed with Grateful Abbott. The Rammet 3 arrived in orbit this cycle and immediately...
So a suggestion from me would be to randomize the starting positions of that audio file. Since we are at the problems area, I would also add the fact that yes, the dialogue boxes of the people living in this world adds a lot to the experience and lore, but I would like to say that it is a little bit annoying to see the same dialogue boxes all the time with the same text each time you revisit an area. I would suggest here to do a little bit more work and change the position of those NPCs when a revisit happens and have alternative dialogues. I've also noticed in Cluster 13 that there is a queue of people entering the city. This queue never moves, it always stays the same. So these problems take away from the immersion that the developers have worked so hard to build. They show a bit of smoke and mirrors department, similar to Cyberpunk 2077, but these overall are not big issues. The small independent studio did what it could, and for the price tag we have detail in this game. If I'm going to nitpick to the end, what's up with all this money? I have a ton of money and not much to do with it. It's way more than I need to pay for my gear or my taxi. Oh well, might as well spend all of it on the slot machines like the local gopnik. I almost forgot to talk about the side quests, which in this game help enrich the world's atmosphere yet again, well, when they work at least. I really enjoyed being scammed into a gladiator ring in a side quest called The Champ. That was a very creative side quest, but going in the Deepstink to gather feral ball sacks? Are you serious? It actually feels like the devs are playing a joke on us. You think you have already been to the Deepstink enough? No, my friend. Go back into the Deepstink and bring me feral ball sacks. I did enjoy partaking in some landlord wars for this weird looking guy, but I have a question regarding the casino courier side quests. If I'm supposed to deliver money to these people, then how come the fee for delivery that I get is more than the money that I give to these people? Like, how is this profitable for the casino? Unless they're a charity casino. There's also side quests that I didn't do, like for example this guy who is jealous of a food recipe at his favorite street food shop. The cook and owner doesn't want to give it to him, so this guy wants me to break in the cook's home or something and steal the recipe. I'm like, man, I got better things to do. Do your own immoral actions on your own, man. Is this the way you respect your favorite shop? I do agree that side quests like this give character to the world with the different shades of morality of these places. Returning to the problems department, there is an issue with some side quests. You start them up because the areas you have to go to are locked. and they will only unlock after you complete the part of the main story that unlocks those areas. So I would suggest here to have these side quests start perhaps after those areas have been unlocked. But shouldn't you have fixed this in the testing phase of the game before deciding to release it? And why does every character in this game look like it's made from rubber or something? All of these textures on the characters look like they're toys and not real organisms. Okay, let's go away from the problems and talk about the music. The Ascent has a beautiful soundtrack written by Paweł Blaszczak from Poland, with a combination of real analog vintage synthesizer as well as modern digital techniques. The game is worth playing to experience this soundtrack alone. I would not say it's as impactful and rememberable as Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon's soundtrack. Made by Power Glove, which is a work that I find myself mentioning quite a lot every year since 2013 when it was composed, but the Ascent soundtrack is still good, well produced, sets the atmosphere perfectly, but it's not quite as legendary. The reason I compare the two is because they both share retrofuturistic aesthetics. One could even say that they are from the synthwave genre. In conclusion, the overall package of this game is pretty great. For 30 euros you get some solid content to play through, especially if you are a sci-fi retro dystopian universe enthusiast. The game is not a masterpiece, but it could get there. Perhaps in the next iteration, if they make the story longer and add more depth to their characters. Perhaps if they stop making things look like rubber, put those side quests in the right order, not send people in the same area looking for ball sacks. Make sure that you don't have things that take people out of the immersion of the atmosphere-packed world you created, and just make sure that you don't annoy your players. That's pretty much it. But as it is, The Ascent is a game that has good satisfying gameplay, a good enough story with good enough written characters for the limited time that we see them at least, a fantastic atmosphere due to the visually coherent and complex world with rich lore. Not to mention it being embraced by a great retrofuturistic soundtrack, which I'm all for since I compose that kind of vibe myself. The Ascent gets a 7 out of 10 from me, but it's like a good 7, you know? A 7+. I was happy when I got the 7+ at my post-Soviet schooling system, so it's all good. I highly recommend you play this game. It's one of the better things out there right now in the gaming market, along with things like Frostpunk or Virtuaverse if you're into the hardcore cyberpunk puzzles. Indie game companies come up with some of the greatest ideas, so let's support them. And before I go, I want to say this. It is our responsibility that after we have seen these types of dystopian systems in games, movies, etc., to then be alert in our own real world and do what we can to stop them from happening. Whenever we see authoritarian measures, or corporations gone bad, or governments doing shady things, agendas being pushed down people's throats, stay awake to reality and help ensure that we have a future worth living in. I hope you liked my review and message. Check the description if you want to support my work. This is Vosto Vlad, signing out.